Hi, guys. So, we all know who Barbie is, right? She doesn't need an introduction. I should hope not. If you don't know who she is, you might need to do a little Googling before watching the rest of this video. It might be a little confusing. But I'm guessing the vast majority of you need no catching up. If you're a frequent visitor here on my channel, then I would hazard a guess that you know a little more about her than the average person. Like, say, her family members. You've been introduced to her little sisters, Chelsea, Stacy, and Skipper. You've probably met Teresa, Nikki, too, her besties. Oh, and Midge. Who can forget Midge? But Barbie has been around since 1959, and that is a lot of years, at least 50, right? Hold on. 65. It's been exactly 65 years. And for 65 years, Barbie has always been ambiguously somewhere between 16 and 25 years old, with a cast of secondary characters that come and go because she's got to keep things fresh. She can't be dragged down by the same old friends for that many years, or the same cousins and sisters. When the time comes, she's got to chuck them out and get some new ones, as one does. Okay, so it's not really like a big secret that the Barbie canon is best described as tenuous, and that especially applies to these secondary characters. For a while, until very recently, Mattel has sort of avoided that issue by just not really having any characters aside from Barbie's sisters and occasionally Brooklyn Barbie. But there's a long history of Barbie friends and family that came and just sort of disappeared into the ether over the years. And that's exactly what this video is about. Really, I think this is going to be incredibly straightforward. There's no super interesting way to spin this other than here's this character, here's where they came from, here's where they went, here's this character, etc. But it's educational, and yes, it will be on the test. I will be dropping by your home later, and I do expect a full explanation on who Kara and Valerie are. So you better be taking notes. Put those chips away. Yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. If I start looking shiny in this video, please ignore it. I thought it would be a great idea to wear my diva jacket because I've been playing a lot of Overwatch lately, and it is like 100 degrees in Texas, so it wasn't a great idea. So a lot of the early Barbie characters, I would say they're pretty well known now, Alan, Midge, Skipper, but there's a few that didn't exactly stand the test of time, I guess you could say. In 1966, which I believe was 2 years after Skipper came about, Mattel introduced two new younger siblings for Barbie, the twins, Tootie and Todd. Now, these two are infamous for quite a number of reasons, especially among people who specifically collect, vintage 60s era Barbies. And not just because they look like little gremlins plotting your demise. So the way these two were manufactured was a little different from how Barbie herself was made. For one, their bodies were a seamless, soft plastic, so they were very pliable and a little rubbery, but they had a wire armature inside of them that made them posable. This was almost immediately a problem, because the plastic was so soft that it was prone to breaking, and the wire skeleton inside of them would poke out and pose a pretty significant safety hazard. But also, these two are prone to a very special chemical reaction that I think I've talked about on here before, because Mattel's Little Kittles, another product from around the time, they have this same exact problem. So, if the plastic of these dolls touch the plastic of any other dolls, I think specifically the sturdier plastic used in a lot of modern dolls, if they're in contact for an extended amount of time, they will melt. They will melt and just fuse together. And when I look at Tootie's face, I don't know, part of me wonders if this is even an accident. If there was ever a doll that was going to stab you and melt your other dolls, it would be this one. So Tootie, presumably for being a danger to everyone around her, was eventually discontinued after about 5 or so years and was effectively deleted from existence. Much to the relief of the entire Roberts household, I imagine. Todd, apparently being a more sympathetic figure, actually sticks around for a little longer. Well, sort of. He was brought back in 1991 as the twin brother of Kelly, who is a different Kelly from the one you're probably thinking of, as this one eventually became Stacy. It's a whole thing, but as of current day, he's not considered a part of Barbie's family anymore. 1966 did give us another member of Barbie's family, though. Enter Francie, who, again, is a pretty significant figure for those that collect specifically vintage dolls, but it doesn't have a huge presence with those who focus on more modern Barbies. So Francie is Barbie's cousin from England. Specifically, her modern cousin, according to the tagline. Because Mattel wanted to phase Barbie into the next era of modern fashion, but they were afraid of losing the customer base they kind of already established, so they put out Francie here, who reflected very modern trends at the time, just kind of in order to test the waters. She was a smash hit and thus heralded in Barbie's official transition into her mod era. And because Francie is a very Barbie-esque figure in her own right, she sort of has her own little group of secondary characters too. There was even one exclusive to the Japanese market, named Tuli-chan. And in 1967, Francie would also technically be the first black character in the Barbie lineup, when Mattel produced a black version of her for sale. Though this was considered somewhat of a misstep, because they just used the same head mold as the original white Francie. Also, the boxes of black Francie dolls did not identify her as Barbie's cousin, interestingly enough. So, Christy would come along in 1968 as the first original black character, and she would, of course, go on to become one of the most significant characters in Barbie history and a part of the core lineup for years and years to come. And speaking of Barbie's friends, some other characters from around the time that didn't get quite the spotlight that Christy and Midge did. Stacy, originally introduced in 1968, she was Barbie's British friend, because a lot of people in the USA were just really, really obsessed with England at the time, for some reason. She was around for a pretty decent amount of time until 1971. I think because Barbie decided to steal her face in order to become Malibu Barbie, which is kind of a morbid way of putting it. PJ was introduced in 1669. No, that's not correct at all. 1969. This doll does not predate the Constitution. PJ was characterized as Barbie's flower child friend, the sort of quintessential hippie girl, I guess. And she would last a few years longer than Stacy did as a recurring character. She survived the transition into the Malibu era and would continue to appear in lines until the early 80s. Steffi was introduced in 1972 and also discontinued in 1972, but she's still with us in spirit because her head mold is still pretty widely used. PJ used it for a while, actually, and it found pretty heavy use in a lot of collector Barbie dolls. It's actually one of my favorite head molds, personally. I love seeing it used, so thank you, Steffi, for what I assume was a noble sacrifice. Then came Kara in 1974, and she was another pretty short-lived character. I do remember talking about her in my video over the history of Black Barbie, and I think I said she replaced Christy, which was not technically correct. Christy was still on the market when Kara was being produced, just in the Malibu line. Kara sort of just kind of filled her role in other standard Barbie lines for about a year. Then, shortly after Mattel did away with PJ, we got Whitney in 1986, who for a very brief time filled the role as Barbie's best friend. And she was very thematic. She always had dark brown hair, she always dressed in blue, which was a nice contrast to Barbie. She also had some really, really gorgeous dolls. Perfume Pretty Whitney, for one. So good. She also used the Steffi mold, by the way. After she was discontinued, Mattel would later reuse her name for one of Stacy's friends, as in Barbie's little sister, Stacy. Because if there's one thing Mattel is going to do, it's reuse a trademark. In 1985, we got Miko, a native Hawaiian character, and she would get a few releases before her face mold began to be used by Kira, who is considered to be the first original Asian character in the main Barbie lineup. Barbie, Christy, Teresa, and Kira do kind of form this friend group, but you'll find that Kira is far less remembered than the others, and I guess it's because she just didn't get quite as many releases. Kira's exact ethnicity is also very ambiguous. There's at least one official source that defines her as Japanese, but it honestly comes down to who you ask. I think Mattel intentionally kept it vague. We're in the late 80s now, and here's where we get a new family member. Another cousin, this one is named Jazzy. And she more or less kind of fulfilled the same role that Francie did so many years earlier, and is just kind of a younger version of Barbie. Mattel did take it a little further, though, and turn the Jazzy lineup into its own sort of spin-off. So Jazzy has her own friends, Chelsea and yet another Stacy, also her boyfriend, Dude, which is just a delightful name. Jazzy unfortunately did not last very long, though. She was discontinued in 1992. I assume the line just did not pan out the way Mattel had hoped. Back in the Barbie friend group, though, so after Kira comes Leah, who again sort of filled that role of Barbie's Asian friend with no specific ethnicity, and also again just ended up pretty forgotten by time compared to Teresa and Christy. Or I think Nikki would be in Christy's place by this point. But even so, Teresa and Nikki would go on to be central characters in Barbie media, like Life in the Dream House, but Leah, she was just sort of gradually phased out. Also in this time, though, the early 2000s, we got Kayla. And Kayla is an interesting character because she was actually specifically intended to be ethnically ambiguous. There's a quote from a Mattel spokesperson in 2002 that said, "Kayla is a doll of all ethnic backgrounds." And she shows up in quite a few lines. One of my all-time favorite Barbie lines ever, actually, Mermaid Fantasy, where she's... I mean, it's safe to say she's pretty white here, and other times where she has a darker skin tone and a much more ambiguous appearance. So there's two ways to look at this. Either Barbie just has a lot of friends named Kayla, which is entirely possible, it's a pretty common name, or just one friend named Kayla, who is very confusing and potentially quite problematic. Oh, of course, we have to talk about Blaine, who became Barbie's new boyfriend in 2004. He was a part of the Cali Girl line, and if you don't know, there was this whole big thing about Barbie and Ken breaking up, her finding someone new. There was a whole online poll and everything, and it ended up being very anticlimactic because we never saw Blaine again after 2006. And now we have two lightning rounds, I guess. One for some characters that only appeared once or twice and never again, and one for international exclusive characters. And then I guess we'll talk about where Barbie is now with characters. Round 1, Jamie from 1970, she walked. She was so good at walking. Kelly from 1973, no, not that Kelly. This one liked to camp at Yellowstone. Tracy and Todd, no, not that Todd. This one got married in 1983 and was never seen again. Nikki, no, not that Nikki. This one is from 1988 and only appeared once in the iconic Animal Lovin' line. Devin and Kayla, no, not that Kayla. These two only appeared in the Dance Club line from 1989. Nia, also from 1989, who only appeared in the Western Fun line. and Tara Lynn, who only appeared in the Western Stampin' line from 1993. Chrissy technically got multiple appearances over a few years, but her existence is so strange that I don't know where else to put her. She's Barbie's baby sister, and is a baby. I think most people only remember her from playing that one Flash game over and over. Okay, let's talk international exclusive characters now. Valerie was only released in Mexico and actually was not produced by Mattel. She was a licensed product, and technically under her own label, but still considered a part of the Barbie umbrella. She was specifically marketed as Barbie's Mexican friend. There's a few more characters who were exclusive to Japan, too. When Barbie was being produced by Takara there, they introduced the characters Flora and Ellie. Many years later, though, when Mattel decided to just start directly importing Barbies instead, they got another exclusive character named Reina. When Mattel opened the Barbie Shanghai boutique in 2009, they introduced a character who would be sold there exclusively, named Mei Chun-Ling. Unfortunately, she ceased to exist when the boutique did in 2011. There's also a few characters who are exclusive to Brazil. There's a lot of Barbies in general that are exclusive to Brazil because the toy company Estrela had a license from Mattel to produce their own Barbies. But some of the named characters are Leah, who got a few releases in the late 80s, Diva, pretty much the same case with her, Vicky, who also had a handful of appearances, and Laura, who only appeared in the Lights and Lace line in 1992. And there we are, some of Barbie's more forgotten friends and family. May they all rest in peace. But that also leads us to today and how Barbie is currently handling its cast of characters. For a while, Mattel seemed pretty averse to the concept of having characters at all, or at least named ones. At least as far as the dolls were concerned, because they did introduce characters in Barbie media who did get dolls, but their products never identified them as these characters, no mention them of, like, having a name on the packaging or anything. Anyways, in 2016, the Barbie vlogs introduced us to Harper. She was the first character to officially make use of the new curvy body type that Mattel had recently introduced. She appeared in a few vlogs before just sort of disappearing, and I think it's because Mattel more or less replaced her with Daisy, who would also appear in the vlogs, a few of the movies, and would get some dolls. Renee is another recent character. She's Chinese-American. She first appeared around 2016 too, and is considered a core cast member now. She, Malibu Barbie, Brooklyn Barbie, and Teresa also currently make up the Barbie Dream Besties line, which apparently will also expand soon to include Ken and Daisy. So I guess we'll see if they stick around and become iconic Barbie characters, or if they'll end up like everyone else in this video. I do actually really miss Barbie having a cast of characters, and I'm glad Mattel seems to be leaning into that again. I don't know, I just think there's something fun about having your character, a favorite character. Especially as a kid, I liked having my character, you know? And even characters that only appear once or twice, they're fun too. But now it's your turn. Tell me your favorite obscure Barbie character. Tell me if you've ever owned any of these dolls, if you wish they got more releases. If you had to pick a character from this video to reintroduce to the modern Barbie canon, who would it be and why? Whatever is on your mind right now, let it out down there in the comments. And when you're done with all of that, just be sure to like and subscribe for any future fashion doll content. Thank you.